Well, hello, good afternoon, friends. Good morning. If you are just a little bit west of here, I'm located in Grand Rapids, Michigan. My name is Doug Baus, and I'm Vice President for Client Services with Money for Ministry and your host for our webinar today, Think Outside the Buck, with our special guest, Jack Ziegler III. We have development directors, gift officers, executive directors, pastors, elders, and deacons, and many others on the call today. It's really great to be together for this wonderful work of supporting some really important causes that make a difference, both here in the United States, North America, but even all around the world. So thank you so much for joining us today. As Jack and I were preparing for our conversation, really two goals or outcomes became apparent to us, and I think I hope you find these helpful. But one, you can have this conversation with your legacy donors. You can do it. It's sometimes incites a little fear in us to think about what we sometimes call asset-based giving, or another term, planned giving. But it's not as hard as it seems, and we'll talk about that today. And then two, I hope you leave with some real specific strategies for exactly how you can have that conversation. So I'm really excited. I hope you are too. We have folks continuing to log in. And as they are, let me go over a few items, housekeeping items and items of interest. There are two buttons at the bottom of your screen. There is a Q&A button. And depending on what your screen looks like, there might be three dots and there's a few other buttons, but we're looking specifically for that Q&A button and the chat button. They'll open up some windows that you can use to engage with us and with each other on the webinar. The Q&A, that's a great place to ask questions that we will answer later on in the webinar. We have set aside about 20 minutes at the end for us to take your questions, and we look forward to that. That's always a fun and engaging time. Put your questions there in the Q&A box. It's easier for us to see them and find them and respond to them if they're in that Q&A box. There's also a chat feature, and that's an opportunity for you to engage with each other. And I would love it if you could, as we're gathering here today, put your name, where you're from, and pick an emoji that describes you today. There's an emoji button there. Maybe there's one that fits you as you are, or pretty close. Just a fun way to get to know each other. The webinar is being recorded, so if you have members of your team who couldn't make it right now and want to hear it later, or perhaps even you are listening to this later, that means you got the recording, so good job. But it is being recorded. We often get questions about that. And then stay tuned later in the call. You can sign up to receive a few things. One, we're offering, as a part of this webinar, as a follow-up, some free talking points, some things that Jack and I are going to be discussing together. We think they'll be really helpful for you as you consider having this conversation with some of your best donors. That, as well as an opportunity to go a little bit deeper with either someone from the Money for Ministry team or Jack himself as a follow-up to this conversation. It's great to see folks writing in the chat. I see some folks with sunglasses on, look like they're maybe ready to head to warmer climates if they're not there already. Good to see you. It's kind of fun to see where folks are writing in from. So great. Well, let's get started. I'd like to welcome our guest today, Jack Ziegler. And Jack, as we get to know each other, his passion is helping families of faith have confidence in their finances. It's at the center of his heart and work. Jack's a financial advisor with Northwestern Mutual based in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, and is committed to guiding his clients through retirement, charitable, estate, and insurance planning, advising them on investments as well as wealth management. And he also has an active presence on LinkedIn. So if you are not following Jack already, I encourage you to do so. There's lots of good information, nuggets, tidbits, things he's seeing, reading, and learning that he shares regularly. And it's a wonderful way for you to get to know him and see his work. He really focuses on pointing people to the work of Christ in his life and the difference that a generous life can make. So Jack, welcome. Glad to have you with us. And I wanted to start out, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, your story. How did you get into financial planning?
Yeah, funny that first introduced me as Jag Ziegler the third, because that's really the big way that that came to be. Yeah, I'm a third generation financial professional. So my grandfather was a finance professional. My father was, and now I am. And I didn't, anticipate taking up this path. Grew up in the faith though, and now have a reminder of their legacy on my finger. This is my grandfather's wedding ring, and now my wedding ring. But yeah, grew up in the faith and really learned every day about what a generous life is about, from the example of my father and my grandfather. What it means to live the faith, to support people, and to be of service to others. And in particular in finances, right? Watching them do that and help a lot of their clients do that too. So I actually, I thought that I was going to be a Catholic priest, and was in the seminary for a short while, studying there, and ultimately realized that that wasn't how God wanted me to be generous in my life, wasn't how He was calling me. So eventually, I jumped back into financial planning after my time there, and worked with families across the country for 3 years, and was really primarily finding myself working with a lot of families of faith who had charitable giving as one of their top goals. And so was diving into learning this space because of that, but never really intentionally focused on it until not long ago. I was diagnosed with cancer, and that kind of shook me up to reflect on what is all of this for, right? Are we storing up treasures for our clients, and just tearing down barns and building bigger barns? Like, there's got to be a better end. There's got to be a more helpful end. And that's where, right, the Lord kind of pointed me in the direction of planned giving. And thanks be to God, I'm cancer free now, and have new direction in my financial planning business, working with families as charitable planning at the forefront of the planning that we're doing. And now with nonprofits and people like Money for Ministry to be able to help and support in that effort for their donors, as well. So, I'm excited, feel like the Lord really drew me to this. We're about to experience the greatest wealth transfer in history over the next 20 years. So couldn't be a better time to be really having these conversations and being proactive with donors and with nonprofits.
Awesome. Thanks. I love how you both have I mean, we've talked about this before, but just the passion, not only to help people manage and grow their wealth, but to use it in a way to help and support charitable causes. I know that's at the center of your heart and at the center of what you do. And that's what makes this conversation today all the more special. So thanks for sharing that. And as we jump into this topic today, think outside the buck and how to think about asset-based giving. I was, and I think this is worth saying at the top of the call, as I was looking over what all of the registrants put in their registration, we asked a question about your greatest challenge when it comes to this conversation, this topic. So many of them, there was things like timing, like when do I ask? When's the appropriate time to ask? I think behind that was just this idea of fear, like I don't want to get it wrong. Some people just said straight up, I'm scared, like I'm afraid. I don't know how to have this conversation. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to begin. And then other things like, I just don't have any knowledge. I don't feel like I know anything. I don't know enough. I have no confidence. And folks who said they felt like they'd be rejected with this kind of ask. It's easy, it's relatively easy, let's just say, to put an appeal in the mail and see what comes back. And it works, and that's effective. But when we start to have these personal conversations with people that we know and trust and love, and who know and love and trust us, it's a different kind of experience. And I think that's part of what's behind the interest today, and what I hope we can help folks talk through. So maybe just to kind of get the conversation started, talk to us a little bit about planned giving, what it is, what is your definition of it, and why should we care?
Yeah. So I think somebody said my audio is not great, so I'm trying to huddle closer to the microphone. But yeah, so planned giving essentially is where donors can trade a major gift of assets, typically, in exchange for income for their families and tax savings for their families, which is something, you know, if you haven't been familiar with any of these tools before, sounds crazy. How is that even possible that by making a gift, um, I can receive income and tax savings? Tax savings we often hear about, not necessarily the income portion of it. So that's really what planned giving is in essence. Why we should care, right? That's why our donors should care. Why should, you know, nonprofits and development professionals care is because, you know, the majority of wealth is held in assets, right? 99% of wealth is held in assets. 1% is held in cash. So when we go and we ask for gifts to our donors, and we're not being specific, we're asking for cash gifts, right? We're asking in the 1% bucket that they have, right? Where maybe they've got, 50,000 or 100,000 in the bank, where they have a certain amount in cash flow monthly. They're thinking in that bucket when they think, man, I don't know about a $5,000 gift or a $10,000 gift, or no way, a $100,000 gift. Like that's half of what I have in cash. How could I ever do that? Right. But when we start changing the conversation and inviting them to think deeper, think differently about it, where maybe you have 100,000 in cash, but several million in my retirement accounts or my business interests or my real estate portfolio, whatever it may be. Now all of a sudden, right, $100,000 to $2 million is much different, right? And that's what this really allows is to have conversations that change the dynamics of a donor relationship, right? Create partners rather than just donors. So that's probably the biggest part of it, is having an answer to, I wish I could give more, but, right, giving an answer to say, hey, there may be some creative solutions that we're not thinking about, and to show them that.
I love a couple things just to reflect on there. I've often thought this, and I've said it before too. It almost sounds too good to be true that you can give a large sum of money that you can save on taxes, and that you might, in some instances, even get an income at the same time. Like, how does that work? And that's why we love experts like yourself, because you're able to help us see how that works and make it possible.
Yeah. So, I mean, just as an example, there's several tools, right, where that can happen. They're typically going to be more on the legacy side of things or on the, so different charitable trusts, right, are a big part of that. Charitable gift annuities are another great tool for that. Even using life insurance or other investments that we can make gifts from using donor advised funds and foundations, right? So those are the different types of tools, right? How I'll just kind of dive into one of them just to give a clearer example of it. With a charitable gift annuity, I think it's really relevant for older retired donors, for donors who have already left a gift in the will, for example. This is something that can be really thoughtful for them, because basically charitable gift annuities, this is perfect graphics, right? As a donor, you can make a gift of assets, say it's from your 401k, just to make it simpler, or an IRA. They can make a gift of assets in exchange for guaranteed lifetime income, right? And a tax deduction from that gift that they're planning on making in their will already, right? As an example. Or they have a fear of, I don't want to make a major gift now because what if I live too long and I need the income for my family, right? These are the things that can start to take away some of those fears of, can make this gift, receive guaranteed lifetime income, and take a tax deduction today, right? This tool works, not to get too deep into the weeds, but basically like reverse life insurance, where it's based on interest rates and age. The older somebody is, the higher that guaranteed lifetime income will be, right? The higher interest rates are, the higher that guaranteed lifetime income will be. So given we're in a very high interest rate environment right now, if you have older donors, right, who are leaving you in their will already, this is an opportunity for them to be able to see a portion of their legacy while they're alive and get tax benefits for it and not be afraid of living too long, right? That's probably the most common reason for not making that gift today, right? So I just think people don't know about it. Right?
Yeah, it's I love, yeah, this is great. And that's an example. We're going to talk a little bit later because it's a great example for how to give folks a picture of how this can work. But we're not expecting anyone on the call today to be able to explain that. And yeah, I know you're going to talk about that a little bit later, but let's go back because I think one of the things that I think is helpful for us to know is who's this conversation for? You talked a little bit about legacy donors, retired donors. One of the if we're talking about the fears that a development director or a executive director or a pastor might have in having this conversation, how do you know you're talking to the right person? I guess is really the first question we want to talk about, and then from there we'll get into some of the how of that.
Yeah, I touched on that a little bit. Thanks, Doug, for bringing us back to it. But yeah, this is really for retired donors, right? Is a great market, especially now, for conversations like this. Any donor who has left a gift in their will, right, already who's committed to leaving something in their will. A will is one of the least efficient ways to leave a gift, right? So if somebody's already planning on doing that, right, being proactive and giving them the opportunity to be proactive in how that's going to be done, and even being given the chance to see a portion of that gift while they're alive, right, see their legacy, get the tax benefits for their legacy while they're alive, is something that most donors who are already committed to that would be happy to have a conversation about if they knew what was possible there. So I would say those two are uniquely positioned right now, but anyone who's making significant cash gifts, right, that is a huge flag sign of, okay, if they're able to give this large cash gift, just making this a gift of assets, even if it's the same exact gift, would be tax beneficial for them, right? At the very least, right, a value add that you can give them. But in doing that, it will also expand their mind as to what's possible in giving, right? Because if you show them, hey, somebody made a $50,000 gift from cash or a $10,000 gift from cash, and if you show them, hey, if you have appreciated assets, you can give from that instead and save more taxes, right? Now they're thinking completely different about where they can give from. And their brain is going to different places of, whoa, if that's possible, what else is possible, right? And it's no longer just that cash bucket, it's making that shift.
Yeah, so true. You've touched a little bit too, and I've heard you use the word fear as you're talking about, we've talked today a little bit about the fear that a development director might have or a major gift officer might have, but there's also the fear that a donor would have. And it really I think it ties into this conversation because those fears are what are keeping them from doing some of the things you're talking about. So can you talk a little bit about the different fears that a donor might be experiencing and how some of that ties into then how we can alleviate those fears and how experts in this area have ways to help make that, I want to say, go away.
Yeah, in some sense, right? And I think this is good to know. I wouldn't think too deeply into this if you're like fundraiser or things like that, right? You might just get in your head about it. And you don't need to know all of the details of how all of this works, right? You just need to know how to ask the right questions and build a relationship, right? And then from there, invite them to take advantage of a new resource. But just to answer your question too, Doug, right? Like when, especially retired donors, right? Their fear as to why am I not making this gift now all boil down to the same 6 things, really. One is, what if I live too long? Right? Like I need to have extra saved and I need to have all of this saved. And because what if I live too long? Right? So that's one of them. The other one is inflation and taxes, right? What about the taxes that I'm going to have to pay? I don't know what that's all going to look like on the estate level, right? What is inflation going to look like? How do I make sure I'm prepared for that as my expenses grow? Market volatility, right, is also another thing that people are thinking about. The market is up or the market is down, or I don't know what it's going to look like. And there's so much uncertainty out there. How do I know that, I'll be able to? So I'll just leave a percentage in my will, and whatever it falls to is what it falls to, right? Then it's healthcare costs. As people get older, long-term care, right, where they're like, I don't know if myself or my spouse are going to need this at some point, and I have to have extra here just in case, right? And then leaving a legacy, not just to the causes they care about, but to their families. How do I make sure that I know what that's going to look like, and I have dollars available to minimize the taxes for that, and which tools are going to be best to do for that? So everything is going to boil down to one of these 6, right? But these are more the conversations that we would have as financial professionals with them. Is really what the job of the nonprofit and the development officer is to say, thank you for leaving us in your will. We're so grateful for that. We want to make sure that we can steward that gift well and say thank you to you. Can we have a conversation? I'd love to hear about what you want your legacy at this organization to be. How do you want us to remember you? How do you want this org to impact the next generation? How do you want it to impact your kids? Right? Those are the conversations that nonprofits can have with their donors. And then the details and the things like that is more comes later from a conversation with a specialist, right? That we're referring to really get under the hood and to say, you're making this gift, and now we know what you want your impact to be. What's holding you back? That's not necessarily the conversation for a development officer to have. That's more for a specialist who's after they've made that choice to do something they will.
Nice. And I think that's important to emphasize that we're sharing these examples to help give context for the kind of donors and the kind of circumstances where this might apply. But to your point exactly, we don't want anybody to leave here today thinking, I got to understand this. I got to be able to repeat this. I got to be able to talk to my donors about this. Really, what we're talking about is some of those questions about legacy and impact that connect to the donor's heart.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as, people might be asking that, like a donor might then ask, like, what would that look like? Or what would we talk about? Right. And you don't need to have all the answers about how a charitable gift annuity works, or, what the tax benefits of a donor advised fund are, or which charitable trust is relevant for them, or any of that, right? You don't even need to know the details of their balance sheet, right? Basically what it is to say, many donors like you have found it really beneficial and been surprised by what's possible by having a proactive conversation in terms of saving taxes and creating income for their family. Would you be open to an introduction? Well, what would we talk about? Honestly, Mr. Mrs. Donor, I'm not the expert there. All I know is people are able to save a lot of taxes and have a greater impact than they imagined possible. And been really happy that they had the conversation. Right. And that can be what you leave it at. If they have further questions, to say, really they're going to ask similar questions that we're talking about now. What do you want your impact to be? And why do you want that? Right? What made you give originally? What made you think of us in your will originally? Right? And then just touch on that and then help you realize that and know more tangibly what it will look like and how that impact can come to be.
Excellent. I love it. I think you said once to me, and I've often used this example, that a great question with any donor is, um, you have it, and this actually came from a fundraising legend, Jerry Panis, who said, "I never end a donor conversation without asking, by the way, have you ever considered including this ministry, this charity in your will?" But I think you actually, and I still think that's a good question for donors
Yeah.
that have not yet included you in their will. But you turned that question on its head once. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about that, because I think it ties into this idea of impact and legacy. Where do you think we should start with those conversations?
Um, yeah, you mean like how do we start having that conversation?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think some great questions would be, right, maybe to schedule a visit with somebody who's already left you in their will, or when you're having a visit with somebody you think is a potential legacy donor, to say, what kind of like what I said before. We want to thank you so much. We want to make sure that we can steward your gift well. So I'm calling to find a time to say thank you and hear about what you want your legacy to be at this ministry, right? How do you want us to remember you? What do you want this to be able to do for the next generation? Um, so I mean, those are some of the questions that I would say. I think it has to happen pretty early in the call to be talking about these things rather than just can you think of us in your will, right? I think that's just the tip of the iceberg of what's possible. But to really say, would you be open to seeing how donors like you save more taxes with the giving they're already doing, right? To your legacy donors. Or in a perfect world, would you want to see this impact while you're alive,
Hmm.
right? Um, those are some things that I can think of. Was there something else that you were referring to that?
Yeah, I just recall you saying and saying, let's back up the conversation before we get to this question of, would you consider, or if you've already done it. The question is really, what do you want your impact to be with this organization, both now while you're alive, but also later after you're gone, and really for generations to come? That might be one question to start with. And the second one, yeah, how does that, what kind of legacy do you want to have with
And
us?
I think something with that is just, you know, um, when it comes to your legacy, where does this org fit in terms of
Mm,
your giving priorities?
mm,
Right? Where does this org fit in terms of your legacy priorities, if at all? Right? If you've already, that's probably not the first question you're asking. You're probably asking what they want their legacy to be first. And then after that, kind of follow up is, okay, where does this work fit in terms of your legacy priorities? That's a question that I ask my clients, right? Is how do we uh, ask them and steward that legacy for them well, right? What do you want to be able to give to your kids? What do you want that to look like? What concerns you about giving money to your family? What concerns you about leaving money to charity? Right. And there's a lot of proactive things that can be done. And I've had many clients say, I want to leave 50% of my, estate to XYZ charity, and say, okay, great. That's a significant portion. We should probably do more than just a will, right? Because there's going to be a lot of opportunities for you to have a really high impact that's not just going to help your family, but also help you while you're alive, help the charity while you're alive. In that, right?
Awesome. You touched on some things that might be worth picking up on. I know, talk about a fam or a donor perhaps that has business interests. Maybe there's a family business that they're looking to pass on. Should they pass it on through the will? Are there other things that, what if there's one child that is interested in taking over the business, but there's two other children that have no interest or have pursued other kinds of professions in their life? How do you think about that, and how do you use that situation to maximize impact for charity? And then how does the donor, or how does the donor officer kind of tap into that without getting into the weeds of it?
Yeah, I don't think that's something that a development officer needs to dive into. That's a pretty complex situation with succession planning for businesses and family-owned businesses especially. Usually a business interest, unless it's a sale, right, it's going to be sold, is not the best asset to leave to a charity, right? Usually you're trying to create wealth outside of that that's going to be able to help them distribute assets equally, right? And let the son or daughter who wants to take over the business have that as their value, and the rest of the estate be split up, right, by different assigned values from different accounts. So, I mean, that's getting into the weeds, though. I don't think that that's, that's overcomplicating what I think most nonprofits ever need to talk to donors about. I think for them, it's really more so about, understanding that they do want to leave a legacy, and maybe they're like, hey, most of my wealth is tied up in my business right now. I just don't know what that's going to look like. Say, I totally understand. A lot of our business owner donors have found it really beneficial to have proactive conversations about legacy planning, and they're usually able to accomplish things they never thought possible. Would you be open to an introduction, right, to a specialist about that? I would avoid getting into the weeds with any of these things, right? Like, you're not meant to wear that hat. You're not meant to be that expert. You're meant to build relationships and to invite them to consider a gift, and then facilitate an introduction to somebody who can help them maximize that gift.
Excellent. I think, and I think almost if you could say that again and repeat it, because I think it's worth it. Would you be interested in being, because it's the specialist, it's the expert who can do it. We're trying to set the donor officers free from that. But
yeah, you've got enough hats on as it is, right, in terms of responsibilities. So, especially for smaller or mid-sized nonprofits where there's not a separate planned giving department or a separate legacy department, right? There's no need to add all of that to the mix. So to be able to just say, hey, donors just like you, whatever it is, right, have found it really beneficial to have proactive conversations with a specialist. They're usually able to save more taxes and have a greater impact than they originally imagined possible. Would you be open to an introduction to see if that'd be helpful for you? Right. And from there, right, it's a lot of the same language that I mentioned before. What will we talk about? Listen, I'm not the expert. I know there's a lot of different tools out there that can be helpful. All I know is that people are able to save more taxes and have a better impact than they thought possible. Right? It's as simple as that. The more complex you make it, you're realizing your own fears about, well, I don't know enough, or I'm wearing enough hats as it is. How can I possibly do it? The more you get into the weeds with it, the more you're going to get yourself in trouble, right? And caught between your feet of what's actually going to be helpful to them and relevant to them or not.
Excellent. So it really boils down to that transition, that handoff to the specialist to make that, to carry that through for you. Nice.
Yeah, I think so. If that's not already existent in a nonprofit, then it sort of has to just be through partnerships. Right? And I would say, if they are concerned like, well, I work with an advisor, being in this industry, I can tell you, right, there's 10,000 advisors in our network. Maybe 1% to 2% of them know about these different tools and use these different tools, right? It's very rare. It's not often talked about. And that's what we're trying to shift and trying to change, is to get more advisors working in this space, to get more estate planning attorneys asking these kinds of questions, more CPAs working together to make this all possible. And yeah, it really starts with that original partnership as a bridge.
So let's talk about that for a little bit, because you're an advisor who does think about these things and does have this in his toolkit. You live in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Someone could connect with you by Zoom if that was a direction they wanted to go. But let's say I live in Seattle, Washington. What are my options? How do I find folks like this who will help me?
Yeah, if you're looking for somebody in person, good luck. I mean, I hope you can find somebody, and I don't know how to go about that, because I've honestly been searching, for a lot of people, not just in person, but across the country. And there's not a ton. There are advisors doing this, and there are really good advisors, really good estate planning attorneys doing this. There's really good CPAs doing this. But it's not essential. Lawyers, it's harder. They should be in the state, right? But for advisors and CPAs, oftentimes they don't have to live in the same state, but they're usually licensed in a lot of states to be able to help with that. So that's what I would say is, like, expand your horizons. It doesn't have to be somebody in person. If the donor really, really wants that, then you should invite them to have the conversation with their advisor about it. But that's kind of more of a shot in the dark, right? Of, a 90% chance that their advisor doesn't really know anything about this stuff.
And just to kind of round out that, I do know that in National Christian Foundation, NCF is one resource that a donor could turn to. And if you're listening today and have a question about that, about where they're located, about how to connect, talk to me or anyone on the Money for Ministry team. We can help you. A lot of the ministries we serve work with local community foundations that can provide some assistance with that kind of planning as well. So there are resources out there. I know, Jack, you are pretty intentional about trying to build a network of charitably minded financial planners as well, so that the opportunities for ministries to continue to tap into these resources will only grow. So
there's now 15 of us that, across the 10,000 that I know of already, who are starting to proactively do this across the country. And then, also connecting with 10 to 15 estate planning attorneys and 6 or 7 CPAs so far. So it is growing. It is that's just what I've come across so far, right? I'm positive there's more. And honestly, Doug, you're probably more the expert in where to find people than I would be.
Yep. Well, let's transition, Jack. There are a number of questions coming in, and I want to make sure we get time for those. As we transition to that, I did want to put up, there will be a poll that will appear. It's an opportunity for you to either request a consultation with someone from Money for Ministry to learn more about how you can grow this part of your donor portfolio and the donors that you work with, or if you'd like to learn more about connecting with Jack and some of the work that he does. There's also this free legacy donor packet. It's really a series of talking points. It's a lot of the stuff that Jack has been saying, but we boiled it down into some really simple talking points that you can use. And we don't go into the weeds of any of these tools and terminologies, but we do give you some ways to think about how to have that conversation, both who to have it with, and then what does that look like? What are the ways you can get your donors to think about connecting with a specialist who can help them maximize their giving now and later? I know we were talking about this and it just hit me, a gift in the will is great, 50, 70, 80, 500,000. I mean, I've seen gifts of all sizes, but what if you, the charity, got a little bit of that now while the donor's alive, and you're probably still in their will for something later. So it's kind of a both and, have your cake and eat it too kind of opportunity that we're presenting to you. Let me take a look at some of the questions that we have coming in. Let's see here. So one person is asking, for what ways do you find are the best ways for an organizational representative to work in complement and collaboration with donors' financial planner groups, for examples, Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, etc. Any best practices there?
Yeah, great question. Fidelity and Schwab do have some great resources for donor advised funds. And I know Fidelity has an entire planned giving department, which is really great. So you might find people with advisors there that have access to that department. Their personal advisor might not be using that department, but they can go and ask their advisor, and you can invite them to ask their advisor if they have a planned giving department, and if you can have if ask them to have a conversation and ask them what resources they have for planned giving. That would be the best way, I think, if they have an existing advisor that they're really set on using in this space, that I would recommend them do. Not everyone is going to even have options or solutions, or even, they may start looking on Google, and start trying to figure that out. But that's really would be the best bet. Otherwise, right, to say, hey, I know you have an advisor. I'd love to introduce you to a specialist who can work in this space in particular, right? You keep your advisor relationship, but somebody who could help in this space specifically. Would you be open to that kind of introduction? And making that very clear too. I would say those are two big things there.
I know you've offered as well to advise people on this as a way to help them and to take it back to their planner to help implement some of these things. That could be an option as well, would it not?
Yeah, there is an option to do a fee-based advice that could be given and then implemented with the existing advisor relationship. Mhm.
Kim asks, I'm interested in an approach to an older business owner with a commercial building they're trying to sell. How do I make the giving beneficial to them? Bargain sale or question mark?
Kim, this is an amazing question, an amazing opportunity. I love this. So for any time there's a sale where there's a ton of capital gains inside of it, meaning what they've put into it is significant, their cost basis is what it's called, is significantly less than what the sale price would be. So either from growth, but also from paying down the property, etc. Or if it's a commercial building, they're probably depreciating the value of it. So there's going to be a huge capital gain that they're going to be slapped with. And they know it and they don't want it, right? So if they're charitably minded, right, in that sale, they can have a portion of the ownership of that building transferred or gifted to a charitable remainder trust, a charitable lead trust. There's several trusts, but a charitable trust that becomes the owner of that interest, right? And at the sale of the building, there's zero capital gains tax owed because it's owned by a charitable trust, which is considered a charitable entity, right? That doesn't have to pay taxes. So there's no capital gains tax. The entire value of that can now be used to purchase an annuity if they want a guaranteed income stream, can be used to be invested, and a portion of those invested dollars can be used as income again for the family. They're getting a tax deduction as well on the future value of that. And the remainder, in a charitable remainder trust, the remainder is passed on to charity. They could do it the opposite way, where the payments are given to the charity and the remainder is passed on to their family, right? Either way, they're not having to pay those capital gains taxes, which, depending on the state, can be as high as 23 to 38%, right? That now they're just saving and can use that to produce income for them.
Okay, so once again, Jack, how does that transition happen? Because Kim, who asked the question, probably was nodding her head as you gave that amazing answer, and not intending to insult her or anybody in any way, but probably didn't get it all. So how does that go again? How do you make the referral?
How do you make the referral? So yeah, I would say, hello, if you're having this conversation with the business owner, they're like, hey, I'm selling this building. I don't know the context of it, right? But if you're having a visit with them, a donor visit with them, to say, hey, many business owners in your shoes have found it really beneficial to have proactive conversations about the giving component of a sale, right? Or have had it very beneficial to talk to a specialist about giving prior to a sale. And they're able to save a ton of taxes and create income for their family they never thought possible while making a gift, right? So you can shorten that, but take whatever bit of that as you want and say, would you be open to an introduction to a specialist, right? And, if they're following up, again, it's the same thing. Listen, I'm not the expert. It's something about a trust, something about, investment, something about an annuity. I don't really know. All I know is that people save a lot of taxes and they have a high impact and create income for their family. Can I introduce you? That's what I would say.
Awesome. All right, here's another question from Gracie. If donors are interested in giving assets, but don't have a financial advisor, and we are focusing more on the impact piece, where should we point them to learn more about the tax benefits and the in the weeds info?
Yeah, if they don't have an advisor and they're making a gift of assets, I would say that's shocking, right? But I would say they should definitely be introduced to somebody, to talk to somebody, right? And again, it's all the same language that I'm sharing with you, right? Of, hey, I'm not the expert in that space. We actually, have some relationships with people who are. I'd love to make an introduction for you to have these conversations. Like, I'm sure you'll be surprised by the tax savings and the benefit that it can have for you.
Yeah. And I know, again, that Jack, you'd be willing to have that conversation, but there are, I like NCF because they work with donors. There are other groups like a Barnabas Foundation that can help with those as well. Those require the charity to be a member to access that. But local community foundations, there's options out there to help you and donors think that through.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Molly says, I am curious how you see development folks having a seat at the table with the donor and the professional advisor so the donor can have the talk about the best tool at the same time as realizing a legacy, as opposed to saying, I don't know. So maybe it's, getting them in together at the same time.
Yeah, so I mean, if the donor and the development officer want to both be like, they want the development officer there, in all parts of the conversation. If the donor, I would say follow the lead of the donor, right? In that example, right? Sometimes a donor may not want, the charity to know all the details of their balance sheet. Sometimes a donor might not want, right, them to be a part of that aspect of the how of the gift. They'd rather, have that more in private. Then you could just be one-on-one. But if they want, all parties present, eventually the charity is going to be involved, obviously. But it's more so in the back end after establishing what is the tool we're going to use to make this gift. Then it's working with the charity to then, make sure that all is able to happen that way. If the development professional, or if the donor wants a development professional there also, then they can be present for that too, and just facilitate it and say, hey, I was talking to Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, and, they're really interested in legacy and giving and just want to hear about the options of that. And then I'd just say, okay, Mr. So-and-so, we usually have to get into the weeds a little bit to understand what's possible. Do you mind that Molly is here during our conversation? Can we speak frankly all together? And, kind of go from there.
Good. Yeah, we like to say at Money for Ministry, serve the donors the way they want to be served. So what would be for you? Would you like me to accompany you, or would you prefer to go on your own after you've made the introduction?
Right, exactly. Yeah, follow the donor's lead is what I would say.
Just reading that again to make sure I didn't miss anything. She talks about realizing legacy. I think that's I mean, there's the opportunity is to leave a legacy both now and for generations to come. So good. All right, here's one I want to pick up from some of the registration questions we had. How do we talk to donors about these topics without sounding greedy, or that we don't care about their families or their loved ones?
Without sounding greedy, or, I mean, I would say, right, like if somebody is already choosing, like committing to leaving something in their will, how could we not schedule a call to thank them? How could we not schedule a call to ask them, or to just ask them what they want their legacy to be, to ask them what they want that impact to look like? right? Ask them, how can we steward this gift well for you? How can we make sure that, we're able to have the impact that you're looking for us to make, right? It's really just saying thank you to them. And then as a thank you, hey, many people have found it really helpful to talk proactively with a specialist about this. That's able to have a higher impact on their families, right? A better impact on their families, save more taxes for their families and more income for their families with the giving they're already doing, right? Would you be open to a conversation to learn more about that? So it's really something that's not gonna hurt the family, right? It's actually gonna help them with the giving they're already planning on doing.
I love it. I mean, I think this is part of the fear, is that we sound greedy, that we're gold diggers, that we don't care about the family, and that couldn't be further from the truth. There is a possibility, a very good, strong one, that this could be a win for the family, a win for the charity, and a win for the kingdom, and that's what we're about.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's about maximizing the giving they're already doing or already planning on doing, and it's allowing them to be the hero and you're the guide, right? In the words of Dr. Russell James, right? It's they're the hero and you guys are the guide to say, hey, here are some tools in the tool belt that can help you accomplish this legacy, that can help you accomplish that impact, that can help you reach that summit. And that's all it is, right? Is facilitating that and giving the tools.
Awesome. All right. Well, another question from Rich. In my 20 plus years, we worked with them separately, attorney and financial planners, and then worked separately with donors. Oh, that's more of a comment than a question, I think.
Yeah. I would say yes. I know. I know that's how it's happening, and in a lot of ways. And I don't know that it's that effective always, right? I think that there's a better way. When I'm working with clients, I'm talking to their estate planning attorneys and their CPAs, right? I have to be on the same page as both of them to make sure that the planning we're doing is going to work out legally and work out tax-wise and be filed correctly. When you add a charity into that mix, all the more important that these people are talking to each other and that they're working together in that effort. It's part of why I'm making partnerships with attorneys and CPAs who are charitably minded to make sure that all of this can be accomplished well, and that the donor, isn't that's the case if the donor is driving and really gung-ho about doing planned giving, and they're bringing it up to their estate planning attorneys, they're bringing it up to their advisors, they're bringing it up to the charities. I'd be hard pressed to see somebody proactively, do all of that as commonly, right? As if we can help make this as easy as possible.
Okay. Good. Similar question, I think, from Bethany. You may have touched on it, but as a financial planner with other parties involved in the client's life, how do you see all the parties, attorney, CPA, Christian-based estate designer, coming together to serve the client?
Yeah, it's essential. It's essential that they work together. Like I said, when really what it is the financial planner is helping with the funding mechanism for the gift. Okay, whether it's going to be an invested asset, an annuity, a life insurance policy, whatever it is, right? They're helping with the funding mechanism. The estate planning attorney, right, is helping with the legal design of the trust or of the gift annuity or of whatever it may be, right? And the CPA is filing, making sure that all the right documents are in place with the IRS to make sure that it's filed, and all deductions are organized and notes are taken appropriately, right? Those are the three roles. So to reestablish that, right? Financial planner is the funding mechanism, right? To use an analogy, right? The estate planning attorney is designing the walls that builds the house, right, of the gift, and the CPA is making sure that basically that all documents are filed correctly and the IRS stamps its approval on everything and appropriately. So that's how they come together. When I help set up different things for clients, that are related to legacy, I make sure I'm talking to their estate planning attorney. If it's about their taxes and deductions or charitable contributions, et cetera, of gifts, I'm making sure I'm having a conversation with their CPA, right? So I hope that answers the question, but yeah, that's how I see it.
And is there one person of those three who is let's just say the quarterback over the others? Does one take the lead? Where would someone start if they're a donor officer trying to make an introduction?
Yeah, I mean, there are estate planning attorneys who play quarterback sometimes, right? There are CPAs sometimes who play quarterback in that scenario, right? I would say that's less common. CPAs are usually more just filing. They're less proactive. They're more reactive to, hey, this is what's happened. Let's make sure it's filed correctly, right? This is what I've spent already. What can I deduct? This is what I've given already. What can I deduct? That's more CPA. Estate planning attorney is more along the lines of, hey, let's make sure we can avoid probate court. Let's make sure that, you're not going to be in any legal trouble here. So again, it's not always as proactive. It's sometimes just more reactive of what do you want? I'll make sure the legal structure is in place. But either way, you're going to need somebody to help fund that. You're going to need somebody to help file the taxes correctly, right? You're going to need all three.
Absolutely. All right, we got time for one more, and I want to ask it because I think I get it a fair amount, and I'm curious your perspective on it. What's a good way to bring up the conversation with our financial planner on how to speak about our charity to their clients? I get this question a fair amount. Should we be marketing to financial planners so that they will think about us when they're doing it? I think that's the direction that this is going.
Yeah, I get that temptation to do that. That's not that's a conflict of interest, right, for the advisor. Right, legally, I mean, I don't know if there's advisors who are doing this against FINRA, but as a registered investment advisor, we cannot both like fundraise for a charity and help with, like, we can't have two relationships there. It has to be one. We got to pick which one of the relationships, right? If you want an advisor to basically help you fundraise, they can't be soliciting gifts from people they're also managing their money for. If that donor wants to make a gift to your organization, they can help facilitate that, absolutely. But they can't solicit gifts and to do that, right? It's a conflict of interest for them, right? I've had many people ask me that too, and unfortunately, I can't say to clients like, hey, here's a list of causes I care about. You should consider making a gift to them. I run a nonprofit myself. I can't even do that, right? I can't even let those intersect.
Yeah, that's helpful, and I think that's you get it, I get it, and I've often thought it's probably not very effective, but you just really kind of sealed the deal there. It's you're not even allowed to. It puts you in a conflict of interest with potential charities. How is the client supposed to know your relationship to them and how that works? So that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are coming up on the hour here. I want to close our time together. Thank you so much, Jack, for your wonderful insights, for the opportunities that you've given us to think about these conversations. Again, those talking points that we offer are there in the poll. You can choose to receive that or to have a consultation with either someone at Money for Ministry or Jack. And before we close, I did want to mention too, we are gathering again in May for our next webinar. This is going to be about deepening donor relationships, and with Tom Hooper of Nimble Connect. Tom and I have gotten to know each other quite well over the last couple of years, and the last 12 months in particular, but I think you're going to love it. How lasting, deeper donor relationships can help you grow your fundraising. So looking forward to that. May 11, you can register through the link right there. on your screen. There will be more opportunities to register in the weeks and months to come. May's not that far off, but it is a month or so away yet. So as we close, I'd like to, again, thank you, Jack, but also to take some time to say a prayer and some words from Scripture as a way to orient our time together, and as a way to say we are both committed to growing charities that are ministry-minded, faith-based, and specifically Christian, both Protestant and Catholic. So hear these words from Psalm 24 as we close our time together. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. For he founded it on the seas and established it on the waters. Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? The one who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not trust in an idol or swear by a false god. They will receive blessing from the Lord and vindication from God their Savior. Who is he, this King of glory? The Lord Almighty. He is the King of glory. Father, may your words be imprinted upon our hearts. May we live in the hope, comfort, and assurance that everything in all creation belongs to you. Amen. Friends, thanks so much for joining us today. Have a great day.